Our next speaker is Sian Ferraz. Sian is an expert historian and heritage professional with over 15 years' experience within the industry in Western Australia. She has worked across a broad variety of roles in the government sector, including heritage listing a number of places in Northam. Sian recently made the successful move to heritage consultancy. Sorry, he missed a word. In a role at Dar Studio, a boutique heritage and architectural practice based in Perth. Thank you very much, Sian.
Right, thanks. There's lots of things to do all at the same time. Hello. This is so exciting. I've bullied everyone to be here. Thanks for coming. Right, so my name's Sian. I'm here to talk about heritage listings in Northam. So the idea of my presentation today is to talk a bit about what the history of heritage listings in Northam tells us about the changing attitudes about history and heritage through time. So what people value about their history and their heritage and how that's changed. And really the idea for this is it's a follow-on from the last presentation that I was allowed to do at the Heritage Council conference in Albany about the skate park. So the idea there was kind of like showcasing this really quite modern 1970s skate park that the community of Albany were really celebrating and wanted to protect, as they saw it was a really important part of their history and their heritage. And with this conference, I thought it offered the opportunity to kind of have a case study of Northam and kind of go back through time to kind of the beginning, to have that discussion of, well, you know, if we're ending up at this place now with Albany and these different kind of heritage places being considered as important, or different kind of places being important, you know, how has that changed through time and what does that demonstrate about how the community thinks of their history and their heritage? So coupling onto that is my exposure to Northam really started in sort of 2011 with Supertown. So I was working for DPLH at the time, and the Heritage Council decided to have a look at a number of places in Northam in response to the Supertown initiative, where there was expected to be population growth and development in the region. So we started looking at what places weren't already heritage listed by the Heritage Council and which ones should be, to essentially protect those. And at the time, there was a number of places which I thought was a surprise that weren't already on the state register. So it's kind of coupling these two things together and seeing what really was considered to be significant and the history of Northam, and sort of tracking that through time. So I've got a number of caveats, though. What this is not is I'm not going to teach you about the history of Northam. So anyone that did that fantastic tour with Michelle, or was listening to Jeffrey's talk yesterday, or some of the stuff that Michael talked about, I've got the Paul Street Bridge in there. This is more about the types of places that were being heritage listed and what that kind of really signifies about what the history of Northam was and what was considered important. I've also got this one over here. So I need to acknowledge that there's really a lack of Aboriginal history and heritage. It's not really well represented in this presentation, owing to the types of legislation that I was looking at and the mechanisms for protecting and celebrating. But that in itself, that lack of representation, to kind of, as a bit of a spoiler, really tells a very loud story about what was considered to be important and worthy of protection. So I'm also really mindful that last night I was really aggressive at the History Slam about timekeeping. So my presentation is like 170 slides long. But we're going to go through it really quick, and I decided to try and skip out some bits, but let's see how we go. So I hope no one's going to get seasick. We're going to go through a bit of an adventure, and it's going to look like this, right? But we're going to go really quickly, and I'm going to skip some of the bits out. So where do we start? So we start at the beginning here. So in 1964, the National Trust of West Australia Act was introduced, and amongst the amazing things the National Trust does, one of them was assessing places and recording and classifying them. So the first one that they did in Northam was in 1972, and that was this lovely church in Irishtown. So as I go through these, there's a couple of points. So I've included my favourite. So I came out to Northam and took a bunch of pictures of places. So what you're seeing is a combination of the places I went to see, the best pictures I took, And there was places that I just didn't go and take pictures of. So there's like rural homesteads that I couldn't get to. So that's the selection. And also these numbers. So the numbers correlate to a big spreadsheet that I had extracted from Inherit and that I sorted through to work out which places were heritage listed first and how that goes through time. So what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing these pictures and these numbers and these places repeated. And that's going to really help communicate the places and the continuation of value of heritage places. But also when there's new places introduced, you're going to see the difference there. So this is our first one. This is 1972. And then the National Trust went through a bit of a blitz in the 80s. So what we have here is this memorial grave. So Jeffrey talked about this yesterday. So this is the first pioneer in Northam. This is his there's grave statue from 1929. I think Jeffrey was saying that the body is somewhere else, but this is certainly, so this is the second place at the National Trust, 1980s. We've also got places like hotels, local government town office, town hall and their lesser hall, another memorial grave, railway station. This is the first post office, big bank, church, big post office, big bank. Need to make sure I'm looking at the right one. Church. This is the first state school. And this is Morby Cottage. So our pioneer friend that we've got here's our memorial grave. This is his house that some of you went to yesterday. Yep, I'm sure you did. And then we have the Register of National Estate. So the Australian Heritage Commission Act in 1975. One of the things that came out of that was an Australia-wide Register of Heritage Places that included some of the places we've already looked at that the National Trust recognised. But then we've got some new ones. So new ones include Big House, Police Station. This is Katrine Precinct. There's a number of places here, but this is the most picturesque picture of the causeway. The church is there too. I took a picture of the church, but I like the causeway. Courthouse, Spencer Brook Hotel. This is Irishtown Agricultural Hall. And the Army camp. So a few of us that were in the room, we've heard a lot about the Army camp. So that was the Register of the National Estate, recognising it as a significant place in the 80s. Pensioner Guard Cottage. And this is an RAAF memorial to a crashed plane. So we're up to number 41. And then what happens? In 1990, we've got the Heritage of Western Australia Act. So I'm going to cover this in two parts. So I want to talk about the State Register of Heritage Places and also Municipal Heritage Inventories because the Heritage Act introduced both. So the Register of Heritage Places really provides that legislative protection of places across WA. And there's like a decision-making process about what sort of places should go on the State Register. So what we're looking at here now is the earliest places to go on the State Register in Northam. So you can presume that these are considered by the Heritage Council at that time to be the most significant places in Northam, worth celebrating and protecting. And we have our memorial grave. We've got police station and our town hall and lesser hall. Yeah. And then there's a number of other things that happen, including these heritage inventories that kind of happen at the same time as the municipal heritage inventories. I'm not going to talk about these all that much, apart from the fire station was one of them. We circle back to that. But these are really kind of management documents to help owners of types of places to work out how to appropriately manage their properties. So municipal heritage inventories is one of the things that the Heritage Act legislated that each local government had to do by something like 1995. Most of them were introduced towards the end of the 90s. In Northam, different page, this was prepared with community input. So they had a number of meetings. The Historical Society was involved, including our friend Jeff, sitting down and working out what places should go on the municipal heritage inventory. One of the differences between this and what we've seen so far is it includes, I'm going to go like this, triangle. So they had different management categories in order to help us understand which places were considered to be the most significant and warranted that closer look at in terms of management and what sort of changes should or could be allowed. The municipal inventory wasn't a statutory document, so it couldn't be enforced, but it really provided that guidance to government and owners about what could and couldn't be done. So I'm not going to go through all of them because it is a lot of places, but believe me, it was on my spreadsheet. So category A places, we've got our old mate, the memorial grave, Town Hall, Lesser Hall. You see, this is where we're getting now where it gets a bit repetitive, but it's really to kind of ram home that point. Railway stations on there, our original post office, big bank, other post office, big house, police station, courthouse. But then we start getting new places. So this is the residency. So this is the big government resident house, which is a bit out of town, but lovely. So this is where you start seeing the local community being involved, and they're introducing, their input is introducing new places and really showing what the local community valued. So the next category down, we got things like hotels. So you're going to start seeing that these are the same places, but they're kind of like sorting them into their own categories of importance. The other memorial grave, so it's still up there, but not high up as our favourite. Church, big bank, lots of banks, church, school, Morby Cottage. So yeah, it's like the earliest pioneer house in Northam, very, very early. But yeah, category B, our precinct, hotel, agricultural hall, pensioner guard cottage. But then we start getting new places. So we saw this on Michelle's walk. This is the Northam Advertiser building. This is where they printed newspapers. So this is being introduced. This is a bank, I always forget. And then we've got Park. We were all there yesterday. Or I think probably all of us have been there now. Stonehouse, and we've got our town offices and the library. So this is being introduced onto the MI in 1998. You know, it was built in the 70s. So in some ways that's quite very recent history, being considered significant enough to be recognised and put on their list. This is the cemetery. It's actually the tree in the cemetery, but then they kind of like be grouped together. And we got a church in Bakers Hill, amongst lots of other things, mind you. And then we got category C. What we got on here is the Northam Army Camp. So in terms of categorisation, this is C. We got new places like the Lands Office. We all saw this. Silver City. So this is the state government buildings built opposite the local government offices. This is one of my favourites actually, but purely from the point as this is a 1980s building, and in 1998 they were putting it on their MI. Again, it's a government building, so like a state government building. So what we're recognising here is how great state government is, but yeah, putting it on the MI. Then we've got things like the flour mill. So this is kind of moving a bit away from big house, church, school, post office. So the flour mill is a big economic contributor, very significant in the history of the town. And that's going on their MI at this point. Then we've got things like big house. So this is Throstle's house. So we've all heard a bit about him. Masonic Hall, Railway Institute. This is not the Paul's Bridge. This is the other walkway. This is Paul's Bridge. So I went here in my sandals and I got that far and I thought maybe not. But yeah, category C at this point. We've got Clackline Bridge. And then the grain silos, which is out of town. Lovely. They've got category D as well. So I've got a couple of these. Let me try and remember what they are. Railway siding. And this is my other favourite one. So this is a fuel depot, storage depot cylinders. So this is between Northam and Spencer's Brook. So this is where they were storing fuel during World War II and rationing it out. This is a great place for inclusion. And then they got category, which they didn't actually add any places. So concurrently to that, we've got the Heritage Council continuously adding more places on the state register. So they're going to be they're mostly going to be similar to places we've seen before. But again, this is showing you what the Heritage Council are thinking of as still very significant at that time. So the Heritage Act has only been introduced for 5 years. So what they're putting on is railways, original post office, big bank, big house, bridge, courthouse, other post office, the residency is going on, and the army camp. So this is, quite an interesting selection of what the Heritage Council at that time would think is important. Then we got some more. So we got the Railway Institute, the cemetery goes on. Then we've got this is like a survey marker. I haven't been out there, so that's not my picture. Briefly, the Register of the National Estate then gets retired, is the word that I'm using, and it gets replaced in some part by the Australian, so the Commonwealth Government decides to list some of their places within their own list for protection. But they're places that the Commonwealth Government owns. So this is one of them. So our big post office is Commonwealth owned, so they protect that. We've got some more state listings. So this is like 10, 15 years into the Heritage Act. So what we're doing here is big banks. So banks are really important in Northam. But yeah, big banks. Here's another big bank, church, Clackline Bridge, lovely. And this is our fire station. So you see the thing I didn't talk about, those inventories is popping up these places, and they're one of the things that the Heritage Council are considering to be significant at the time, as well as our town hall and library. Let's see. And then so this is where we get to super towns. So I've got the National Heritage Place in there. That's the pipeline. I'm not talking about that. So this is, so in 2010, I need to go back one, spoiling it. So the state government announced super towns. So they were expecting there to be population growth, and they were going to encourage it in specific regional areas, including Esperance, which was another one that we did. And the focus at the time was the Heritage Council sat down and they were like, what are the heritage places that we are aware of? Which ones should we be looking at and protecting? So we as officers, we got given a list, and you work through the list. And this is a bit more repetitive, even more repetitive than I would like it to be. So this is kind of showing you the different page. The list of places that we started with, and then the list of places that we ended with. So we were then prioritising for assessment Northam, it's a girls' school, so the state school, Morby Cottage, Spencer's Brook Hotel, Pensioner Guard Hotel, Northam Advertiser Building, Fermoy House, the flour mill, the fire station. Let's go back. But, as there was a question yesterday to Darren about heritage listings and registrations and community consultation. So, this was the list of places that we were working on, and very much so when you're doing those assessments, it's reliant on, having cooperation with owners and that sort of engagement and support. So not all of them went on the state register, not all of the assessments progressed, but the ones that did and ended up being, so agreement between owners and the Heritage Council about the significance of places. We've got Northam State School, great addition, Fermoy House, so that's now a school as well. The fire station was actually interim listed and got permanent listed. And then we got Morby Cottage. So, comparative to things like Maddington Homestead in the metropolitan area, this is a very, very early pioneer house. It's very highly intact, only going on the state register in 2016. So it kind of begs the question at that time, like, why wasn't it looked at before? Is it not considered as important? Other sort of pioneer colonial houses that we were looking at, did it just fall under the radar because it's being managed by the Historical Society? Did the Heritage Council not think it that significant? And then we move on so there's an MI review in 2012, which I thought was going to be really fascinating, but let me explain why and why I didn't do this. So when they do MI reviews, they can change categories of places, and I thought it was going to be really interesting to track what was going up and down, which was a lot of work. So what I ended up doing is I just want to show you the new places that were added at that time, one of which is this RAAF memorial. So this is the first time it's being added to the MI in 2012. And this was one of those places, it was like registered with the National Estate in the 1980s. So like the reason why this wasn't included before now, I mean, I could have a good guess. So to get to this, you have to drive, turn off at Clackline, you go down a road, and then you cross it's down a million miles down a laneway next to someone's house in the middle of nowhere. So maybe it's just not that well known. Maybe it wasn't something that was really highly publicised. But, there's this very early, grave. It's really important to some people, but missed out until now. We've got our RSL Memorial Hall. This is actually the road bridge they've included for the first time. So this is kind of showing us that the types of places are shifting in the community opinion about what is their heritage and what is significant and what should be looked after, including the Agricultural Society Showground. So where we are over there, there. No, it's this way, this one. That was added for the first time. So that's something they think, as an agricultural community is really important. We got things like this is the station master's house in Spencer's Brook. Oh my God, look at the time. And then we got things like there's ruins added into this box. Right. And then, I'm so stressed. And then what we have here is in 2020, this is kind of the last hump. The Shire of Northam introduced a heritage list. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is their first heritage list because I couldn't work it out. But if we could get that, like what this is really demonstrating is what goes on or off. So this is the Shire of Northam telling us what is so significant that they're going to provide legal protection to it through their planning system. And I'm just going to flick through these really quick because we've seen all of them. But there's things, what is interesting is what is not included just as much as what is included. So my old friend, the Irish Town Church, it's still not on anyone's list apart from the National Trust. But then we've got our old friends, like they're all on the heritage list. Let's go. We've seen all of these. It's the best. We've got the army camp is on here, but that is black and white because that's the picture that I have. But what we start missing out is this one, my bank. The park isn't on there. Stone House isn't on there. But all of our old friends, they're on there. Silver City isn't on there. And then, these. So like, the bridge isn't on there. But Michael's Bridge is on there. Yes, Clackline Bridge. But the silos aren't. And these silos aren't. So this is where we end up at. So we've done this whole journey. So I got to the end of this and I kind of reflected on we've gone through all these places. We've learned about what the different communities and the different groups have thought of significant over time. And it really begs that question where I come back to Albany and I'm thinking about what is next? Which is kind of the question that I asked. I did talk to Jeffrey about it, talk to some of the people at the local government to say, what's next? And instinctively you're thinking is it going to be like Albany? Are we looking at skate parks? Are we going to be looking at infrastructure a bit more than we would do ordinarily and, moving away from colonial type history? Probably based on that little introduction that I gave, there's going to be a bit more Aboriginal representation, we would think, going forward. Or the other idea I had was hot air ballooning. It's one of those things that Northam are known for. So is this how they're going to be, recognising their identity and their history and their heritage? But certainly this journey that we've been through so far has kind of demonstrated how there's been a shift in a diversification. So both in terms of the age of structures, their history, their meanings. So, our memorial grave that we've seen 1,000 times, to more modern architectural government buildings, still government buildings, to things like the flour mill and the grain silos being a bit more kind of economic, representing that economic history. I don't know. But, these are all the sorts of things that possibly they'll be thinking about going forward. More things are being identified all the time. But also, when I did talk to people in Northam about what was next, that was what I would be asking. And what they said to me is, not as directly, they said, well, what we need is to stop the things that we already have being demolished and being let go. So, there needs to be tighter controls about these things. We know what the history is. We need to protect what is there and also have more money. So, a lot of these places are owned by private individuals or sometimes even state government or local government. And, if that is something as a community we've recognised as significant, then potentially the way forward is providing more support and more funding for that or more professional advice to people that look after these places. So the future is, we'll see what happens. And I couldn't think of an end slide, so I've got 4. One of them this is right next to those fuel silos. This is a lovely empty road between Northam and Spencer's Brook. Also love to put a picture of my children in them. So this is that bridge. Not Michael's Bridge, which doesn't have a floor, or hot air ballooning. That's my other one. So that's our whistle top stop tour through Northam's heritage. Yes, I'm exhausted.
That's fun. Thanks, Sian.
Yes, that was so aggressive.
I know. Now you know how it feels. Any questions for Sian? You've stunned them all.
Yes. I kind of thought everyone would be seasick.
I guess kind of a question and comment, and it was, I don't know if Richard Often's here, but after the talk yesterday with Darren and just thinking about heritage listing, and my question to Richard, because I was driving in the car with him, was, do we ever look to take things off both the state register and because, like you say, over time we're changing our opinions, and what is going on the list now is so different to what was going on 20, 30 years ago. So is there an appetite, do you think, for people to start reflecting on their lists and start taking things off, I guess?
Yes. Well, I'm not the Heritage Council, but I can tell you an answer. I think what is considered heritage is changing all the time. Darren mentioned there's loads of churches on the register, so we're not doing any more of those. But I think it's really representative of, something that was considered to be significant, part of history. Also, if we combine them with that factor of you need owner support, the church was really supportive of their places going on the state register. The value of changing the makeup of the register to represent something different, I think would be worth a conversation to think about what the register is supposed to do. Whether it's worth de-escalating places or taking places off because they're no longer of state significance. There's been further research done to determine that they're not worthy of that level of scrutiny, whether it can just stay on an MI or on a list. The MIs have that freedom to reshuffle the significance of their places, whereas the register doesn't. But yeah, it's worth thinking about. I remember, there's a new Heritage Act compared to the 1990s, and it doesn't have to mean it has to stay that way. So if there's a different idea going forward, how well does that protect places that are not built into the ground? It may be another question. So is it the role of the Heritage Council to protect and celebrate intangible places? Language was another one that was being discussed yesterday. Is there capacity in the Heritage Act to do that? Is that the role of the Heritage Council to do that? If it's not, is it someone else? I think these are all kind of interesting conversations to be having in this space. And probably could respond to what we, the people, think is important and suggest some ideas.
Thank you. It was probably a little bit more of a comment, but I was interested in the municipal inventories are obviously being developed at local government level. What sort of information flow between the Heritage Council and people like yourselves and local governments to encourage more local governments to actually be interested in their built heritage and protect it rather than seeing it as a burden and, an opportunity to become a ruin and we don't have to worry about that? Is there things in place that we could be looking at?
Yeah, I think so. Local governments with their municipal inventories that are now called local heritage surveys, they're supposed to be redoing them every 5 years, which is quite a lot of work. But I think doing them at all is helpful. And I think now, with more knowledge and more understanding, there's more appetite in local governments to create those policies that support making more clear decisions about what should and shouldn't be done with heritage places, developing things like archaeological guides about ruins or not ruins, what the options are, I think all helps people in local government and owners to make those decisions in an informed way. Where the money comes from and how that's done is a challenge as well. There's not an endless supply, but politically and reputationally, if these are things that are raised by owners, by local government, by state government, that there's not enough money, you can only go so far and say, look, we did it and it still fell down, or we did it and there wasn't enough support. So, yeah,